acknowledge that Mugabe has declared war against the people of Zimbabwe. He has to acknowledge that people are being beaten up, people are being tortured, people are being murdered with impunity. So there has to be a process of accountability. And I think it is so wrong for the South African president, even up to today, to keep quiet and operate as if everything is normal in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is at war. And unfortunately, only one side is armed. So it's the first recognition that Mugabe has declared a war against the people. The second position for them would then be to recognize that the MDC won the March elections. So whatever transitional authority that is going to be put in place, it has to recognize that the MDC got the majority of the votes at presidential, at parliamentary, and at local government level. And then thirdly, they have to work on a demilitarization program, a serious one, and South Africa can do that. The army is right now on the streets. The MDC's chairperson for youth, Tamsanga Mahlangu, is in hospital fighting for his life. He was brutally assaulted by the army yesterday. I will not talk of those who have been shot dead in front of SADC observers. So I think President Mbeki has to come up with a more robust and more honest diplomatic solution to the Zimbabwean crisis.
The United Nations, what can they do? Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General, called for immediate end to the campaign of violence and intimidation that has marred the election. There's a meeting of the Security Council.
Well, basically, we need the Security Council to come up with a more robust resolution. And again, at that level, we do not need South Africa to be blocking the Security Council from taking action on what is going on in Zimbabwe. So we really need the UN and the Security Council to be involved. We have called in the past for the deployment of UN peacekeepers to go to Zimbabwe. There's no election and there's no peace that is going to be possible in Zimbabwe without the presence of people who are trained in actually dealing with the military. And I think the evidence of the intimidation of SADC over the past days shows and creates a real case for the UN to actually.
Grace Quinje, I want to thank you for being with us, journalist and political activist, one of the founders of the main opposition party, Movement for Democratic Change. This weekend, Morgan Tsvangirai, the presidential candidate who was to participate in the presidential runoff on Friday, pulled out of the election. Yesterday, front page of the New York Times in a piece by Barry Burak and Celia Duggar. Barry Burak's the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist who just over 2 months ago was arrested when covering Zimbabwe, wrote, Thandrai Indira was a shrewd choice for assassination, young, courageous, and admired. Kill him and fear would pulse through 1,000 spines. He was an up-and-comer in Zimbabwe's opposition party, a charismatic figure with a strong following in the Harare slums where he lived. There were rumors his name was on a hit list. For weeks, he prudently hid out, but his wife, Plaxidus, desperately pleaded with him to come home for a night. He slipped back to his family on May 12th. The 5 killers pushed through the door soon after dawn as Mr. Indira, who was 30 years old, slept and his wife made porridge for their 2 children. He was wrenched from his bed, roughed up, stuffed into the back seat of a double-cab Toyota pickup. They're going to kill me, he cried, Plaxidus said. As the children watched from the door, 2 men sat on his back. A gag was shoved in his mouth, and his head was yanked upward, a technique of asphyxiation, later presumed in a physician's post-mortem to be the cause of his death. And the article goes on to say, even as hundreds of election observers from neighboring countries were deployed across Zimbabwe in the past days, the gruesome killings and beatings of opposition figures have continued. Talking about the body of the wife of Harare's newly chosen mayor, found Wednesday, her face so badly bashed in that her own brother only recognized her by her brown corduroy skirt and plaited hair. On Thursday, the bodies of 4 more opposition activists turned up after they'd been abducted by men shouting ruling party slogans. We'll continue to cover what happens in Zimbabwe in this critical week. And